In an unexpected moment of raw emotion, legendary boxer Mike Tyson breaks down in tears during a live TV interview after receiving a heartfelt letter from Ibrahim Traoré, the president of Burkina Faso. This emotional exchange highlights a surprising connection, a deep mutual respect, between two powerful figures from vastly different worlds. Get ready for an unforgettable, tear-jerking moment that left the entire studio silent. It was supposed to be a regular interview. Mike Tyson, the former heavyweight champion of the world, had been invited on a major American morning show to discuss his new memoir and upcoming Netflix documentary. He looked calm, a little tired, but sharp as ever. The cameras rolled. The host smiled. "Mike, you've seen it all, but we have something today you didn't expect." Mike raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" A producer handed the host a cream-colored envelope with gold writing. "This letter arrived last night from West Africa, from the president of Burkina Faso, Ibrahim Traoré." The audience fell silent. Mike's jaw clenched slightly. The host continued, "He said it was for you, only you, but he agreed we could read it live if you wanted." Mike nodded slowly, unsure. "Go ahead," he said. What happened next was not just shocking, it was soul-shaking. The letter would unlock something buried deep in Mike, something the world had never truly seen. Not the fighter, not the showman, but the broken boy behind the gloves, and the leader who reached him across continents. The host unfolded the letter and began reading slowly. "Dear Mr. Tyson, my name is Ibrahim Traoré, President of the Transition of Burkina Faso. I do not write this to you as a politician. I write this as a boy who once had nothing and saw you fight on a flickering TV in a crowded room." Mike looked stunned. His breathing changed. "You were not just a boxer," the host read on. "You were proof that pain could be turned into power, that a boy from nowhere could stand before giants and make them fall." Mike leaned forward. The host continued, "When my country was hurting, I remembered your eyes in the ring, not your fists but your eyes, the pain, the fire, the refusal to be broken." The room was silent. "Thank you, Mike Tyson, for teaching me to rise, not as a fighter but as a man." Mike looked away. His voice cracked. "Stop. Just stop for a second." Tears were already forming. He tried to smile, but something inside him had shattered, and the world was about to see what was left. The host gently placed the letter on the table. Mike Tyson's hands were shaking. The studio had never been so quiet. You could hear the lights hum. Mike looked down, trying to hold back tears, but it was no use. They came slow at first, then heavy. "He saw me," Mike whispered. "Not the knockouts, not the fame, just me." He wiped his face, but the tears kept coming. "I was 14, homeless, angry. I wanted to die back then. Nobody knew. Nobody cared." The audience gasped. "I fought, 'cause it was the only way anyone looked at me," he said. Then he looked into the camera. "But to know that halfway across the world, someone watched me and became something, a president." He broke down completely. No cameras cut away. No one dared move. The most feared man in the ring was now the most human man in the room. In that moment, it wasn't about boxing. It was about being seen. The boy who once had no voice had now helped another boy become a leader. From pain came purpose. From punches came peace. And from a letter came healing. After the show cut to commercial, Mike sat in silence, still wiping his eyes. The host leaned in quietly, asking, "Do you want to continue?" Mike nodded. "Yes. The world needs to hear this." The cameras came back on, but this time there was no script, no promotional questions, just raw truth. "Ibrahim Traoré," Mike said, his voice thick with emotion, "I never met you, but I feel like I know you." He held the letter close, like it was something sacred. "I wasn't supposed to survive my youth. I was a thief, a fighter. I was locked up before I knew love." The crowd leaned in. "But this man, this president, he saw strength in my suffering." He paused. "Nobody talks about the pain, the hunger, the nights you pray not to wake up. But this letter, it told me I wasn't alone. The studio, once filled with laughter and lights, was now a place of reflection. One man's tears had become another man's message. And now the world was listening. That same evening, halfway across the world, President Ibrahim Traoré sat alone in his modest office in Ouagadougou. The lights were dim. The fan buzzed overhead. His security team waited outside, giving him space. He was watching the interview live. When Mike cried, Traoré looked down, wiping his own tears quietly. He felt it, he whispered in French. He really felt it. Behind him, the wall was lined with photos, not of presidents but of young children in dusty schools, farmers, nurses, soldiers, his people. And next to them, a small, framed photo of a young Mike Tyson, standing shirtless, fists clenched, eyes burning. It wasn't about boxing. It was about the spirit. A few feet away, his assistant entered the room with an update. The UN just reached out. They saw the interview. They want to talk about your education reforms again. Ibrahim nodded. Let them wait. Tonight, the world doesn't need politics. He turned back to the screen. Tonight, it needs truth. Back in New York, the interview had gone viral. Within hours, it reached millions. Clips of Mike Tyson weeping over Ibrahim Traoré's letter flooded the internet. Celebrities shared it. Schools played it. Refugee camps in Africa cheered. But it wasn't over. Just after midnight, Mike's phone rang, an unknown number, international code. He hesitated, then answered. Hello. A calm, deep voice responded, Mr. Tyson, this is Ibrahim Traoré. Silence. Mike's throat tightened. You're the guy from the letter. Yes, Traoré replied. And you're the man who taught me how to survive when I was just a boy with no shoes. They didn't speak like leaders or legends. They spoke like survivors. Thank you, Mike whispered. No, Traoré replied. Thank you. You gave me the courage to stand up when the world told me to kneel. Pause. Then Traoré said, Mike, would you come to Burkina Faso? Mike blinked, stunned. What for? Not for a fight, Traoré said softly, for hope. In that moment, two men born on different continents, scarred by different battles, had found a bridge through pain. Something extraordinary had just begun. Mike Tyson didn't sleep that night. After speaking with Ibrahim Traoré, he stared at the letter again, reading it over and over. There were no fancy words, just truth. One line echoed in his head. When I was 13, I fought not with gloves, but with hunger. That was Mike's life too. He remembered stealing food from corner stores in Brooklyn, fighting bullies, getting locked up at a juvenile center. Nobody believed in him except one trainer, just like Ibrahim had no one until he believed in himself. The next morning, Mike's team entered his dressing room. They had a schedule lined up. Brand deals, training shoots, media appearances. But he tore it up. I'm flying to Burkina Faso. They stared in shock. Mike, are you sure? He looked at them with the same fire he had in the ring. It's not about boxing anymore. It's about the kid I was and the boy he still is. 2 days later, Mike arrived in Ouagadougou. There were no red carpets, no paparazzi, just dust, sun, and faces that glowed with disbelief. Children ran barefoot alongside his car, screaming, Mike Tyson! Mike Tyson! But he wasn't there to be a hero. President Traoré greeted him at the modest government house. No cameras, no rehearsed smiles, just a handshake that lasted longer than expected. They didn't talk politics, they talked pain. Traoré took Mike to a rural school with broken walls but loud laughter. One of the boys had a swollen eye from a street fight. Mike sat beside him on the floor. You fight? He asked. The boy nodded. Me too, Mike whispered. But you know the strongest punch? It's the one you don't throw. Traoré knelt beside them. In this country, he said, you are not your scars. You are your spirit. The boy cried and so did Mike. That night, the president and the boxer sat on a rooftop, overlooking the glowing lights of a quiet Burkina Faso. Traoré handed Mike a box. Inside were dozens of letters, all written by children across the country. "They heard about the letter I sent you," Traoré said. "Now they wrote to you." Mike opened one. "Dear Mike Tyson, you are a lion who made it through fire. Please don't forget us." Another read, "My papa died fighting to protect our village, but now I believe I can be strong like you." Tears rolled down Mike's cheeks. He clutched the letters like they were gold. "These are worth more than belts, more than anything I ever won." Traoré nodded. "And now you see, brother, pain connects us more than fame ever could." The air was still, not a sound but the wind rustling through the pages of those letters. In that quiet, a bond was sealed, not by power, not by politics, but by two broken boys who survived. As Mike flipped through the last letter, one stood out, written on torn notebook paper. "Dear Mr. Tyson, my name is Maddie. I am 11 years old. My father was a soldier. He said your fights gave him courage. He died last year. Now I try to be brave. I heard you cry. That means even lions cry. So maybe I can cry too." Mike's hand shook. He remembered being 11, watching his own mother fade away, feeling like the world had no room for boys like him. He whispered almost to himself, "Even lions cry." President Traoré looked at him, eyes filled with silent understanding. "That boy Maddie lives nearby. Would you like to meet him?" Mike didn't answer with words. He just nodded. The next morning they drove for 2 hours through dusty roads, passing goats, women balancing water, and boys playing football with plastic bags. When they arrived, Maddie ran out barefoot, his face lit with awe. He wasn't meeting a boxer. He was meeting a broken warrior just like himself. Maddie stood frozen, clutching a picture of his father in a soldier's uniform, creased, weathered, like it had been held too many nights under his pillow. Mike knelt down eye to eye with him. "You're braver than I ever was, little man." Maddie blinked, tears brimming. "But I cry," he said. Mike smiled softly. "So do I." Without warning, the boy stepped forward and hugged him, not the kind of hug for pictures or cameras, but the kind you give when you're scared someone will leave again. Mike held him tight and then he broke. Tears poured down his face, loud sobs that shook his whole body. The cameras had been left behind. The crew stayed respectfully distant, but President Traoré stood nearby, hand over his chest, eyes glassy. It was not just a hug between a child and a legend. It was pain meeting pain, loss meeting loss, and healing being born in the middle. As they sat under a mango tree, Maddie asked quietly, "Will you leave too?" Mike looked him in the eye. "I'll be back. I promise." And this time he meant it. Mike returned to America 2 days later. An interview was already scheduled on a major network. What was supposed to be a simple conversation about boxing took a different turn. The host joked, "You've been off the grid, Mike?" "Africa, huh? What were you doing starting a new fight club?" Mike chuckled, then paused. "Actually, I was being healed by an 11-year-old boy." The room went silent. He pulled out Maddie's letter. The audience listened. "Even lions cry," he read aloud, voice cracking. And then, right there on live TV, the most feared boxer in history cried. The studio froze. No one knew what to say. The host's smile faded into quiet respect. "I met kids who've lost everything," Mike said, "and yet they have more heart than most champions I've ever seen." He looked straight into the camera. "Ibrahim Traoré, thank you for reminding me that real strength isn't fists, it's love." There wasn't a dry eye in the room, and across the world, millions watched in silence. Some cried. Some smiled. But all of them felt something they hadn't felt in a long time: hope. The day after the emotional interview, Mike's phone rang. It was early morning. He didn't recognize the number, but something made him answer. "Mike Tyson?" the voice asked gently. "Yes." "Who's this?" "This is Ibrahim Traoré, president of Burkina Faso." There was a pause. Then Traoré said, "I saw what you did for Maddie. You didn't just honor his father. You healed something in him, and in you." Mike was quiet, moved by the sincerity in Traoré's voice. "I want to invite you back," Traoré continued. "But this time not just for one boy, for a nation. I want you to speak to the youth. Tell them your story. Show them what rising from nothing looks like." Mike exhaled deeply. His voice cracked. "You don't know what that means to me, brother." Traoré replied, "I do." They made plans right there. Within 48 hours, Mike was flying back. This wasn't about boxing anymore. It was about redemption. It was about using scars as a message. For the first time in decades, Mike Tyson wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for hope. The school in Ouagadougou was packed. Hundreds of students in faded uniforms sat on the dusty ground, waiting. Some held notebooks. Others clutched photos of Tyson from old newspaper cuttings. Mike arrived quietly. No flashy entourage, no stage lights, just him, a chair, and a translator. He began speaking. His words were slow, but each one hit like a punch. "I used to think I was just a weapon," he said. "I didn't know I had a heart until I listened to a child." He told them about Maddie, about his mother's death, about prison, about how he fought in the ring because he couldn't fight his pain anywhere else. Tears welled up in the eyes of boys who thought real men never cried. Mike stood up, walked into the crowd, and pointed at a boy. You think no one sees you, but I do. You're strong even when you feel broken." The boy began crying, then another, then another. President Traoré, standing at the back, wiped a tear from his cheek. This wasn't a speech. It was a revolution of hearts. That night, Mike sat beside President Traoré under the stars. They were quiet for a while. No cameras, no press, just two men with heavy pasts and full hearts. "Why did you write that letter, Mr. President?" Mike finally asked. Traoré smiled softly. "Because I saw the boy behind the fighter, and I believed the world still needed him." Mike didn't respond. He couldn't. His throat tightened. Then Traoré added, "You remind my people that strength isn't about fists. It's about rising again and again after life knocks you down." Mike nodded. "That's all I ever tried to do." They shook hands. No, they clasped hands like brothers, like two survivors from different corners of the world. The next morning, photos of Mike's visit to the school went viral, not for fame but for something deeper. People everywhere cried, watching clips of him hugging children, telling them they mattered, reminding them that scars are not shameful, they're proof you survived. Mike Tyson left Burkina Faso not just as a boxing legend, but as a healer. And Ibrahim Traoré? The world saw him in a new light, not just a leader but a listener of hearts. Back in New York, Mike returned to the studio where everything had started. The host invited him back for a follow-up interview. The producers expected smiles and polite niceties. What they got was silence. The lights dimmed. Mike looked older, wiser. His hands trembled slightly. The host asked, "Mike, what changed you the most in Burkina Faso?" Mike looked at the camera and whispered, "A child and a president." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small drawing. It was from Maddie, the little boy from the village. A simple picture. Mike holding his hand, Ibrahim Traoré behind them, both smiling. The studio went still. Mike choked up. "He said he doesn't want to fight anymore," Mike said. "He just wants to grow." The audience held their breath. The host, usually quick with words, couldn't say a thing. Mike's voice cracked. "That boy gave me peace. And Traoré, he gave me purpose." A tear rolled down his cheek, and for once the world saw not a fighter, not a legend, but a man who was finally healing. After the show, Mike sat alone in his dressing room. A staff member walked in holding a brown envelope. "It just arrived. International mail," she said. Mike opened it carefully. Inside was a second letter from President Ibrahim Traoré. The handwriting was familiar, the words even more so. "My brother Mike, they call me a president, but I am just a man who dreams of healing, dreams of peace. Your visit reminded us all that pain is not the end. It's a beginning if we dare to feel it, not fight it. Burkina Faso thanks you. I thank you. And the boy Maddie, he now sleeps peacefully." Mike stared at the paper. For the first time in years, he whispered a prayer, not for himself but for every broken kid in the world and every leader with a heart. He pressed the letter to his chest. "I was never the baddest man on the planet," he whispered. "I was just a boy waiting to be heard." And finally someone had listened. 1 week, that's all it took to turn pain into purpose. Mike Tyson stood on the balcony of a building in Harlem, watching a small group of kids sparring below. He wasn't their coach. He was just present. When one boy tripped, Mike didn't laugh. He walked down, lifted him up, and said, "Every fall teaches you how to rise." His phone buzzed, a photo from Burkina Faso. Maddie was smiling, standing beside a brand new boxing gym. The gym was named Tyson Hope Center, sponsored by the Burkina Faso government, signed by President Traoré himself. Mike closed his eyes. The world had called him a monster. Now, a boy across the ocean saw him as a mentor, and that was enough. The end. But your tears matter. If this story moved you even a little, please like to show love. Subscribe for more true stories that heal. Comment below, what moment made you cry the most? Let's fill this space with love, strength, and second chances. Because even the toughest fighters need someone to believe in them. Until the next story, stay human. Stay kind.